So the nervous system is composed of 100 billion neurons, and neurons are cells in the nervous system whose primary function is to receive and transmit information. The three major parts of the neuron are the cell body, which is also known as the soma, and this contains the nucleus of the cell, and the nucleus contains all the genetic material of the cell and just controls all the activity. And the other function of the soma is to just regulate the cell and to keep it alive. And coming out of the cell body are dendrites, which are branching tree-like fibers that collect info from other cells and send info to the soma. So they kind of collect the information and bring it back into the cell body. And some of them are branched out to more easily receive information from the other cells. And the third major part of the neuron is the axon, which is the long segmented fiber that transmits info away from the cell body toward other neurons or to muscles and glands. And this is pretty much the hallway that all the information passes through. It enters into the dendrites, goes through the cell body, and then through the axon and out into other cells. And depending where they are in the body, they can be really long, sometimes up to several feet. So that's pretty interesting. And to speed up communication in the process in the axons, they're surrounded by the myelin sheath, which is a layer of fatty tissue surrounding the axon, which acts as insulator, and it allows for faster passing of electrical signals. And there are little breaks in the myelin sheath, which are called nodes of Ranvier, which also acts to speed up the process. And after they go through the axon, the axons continue to branch out, and they go into the terminal buttons, which is the very ends of the axon. And here, the terminal buttons communicate with other neurons and out into the synaptic gap, which is the gap between the different neurons. And sometimes they can communicate with up to thousands of others, and this obviously leads to a very sophisticated communication system. And also the terminal buttons at the ends, they contain vesicles which store neurotransmitters that are also released into synaptic gaps. So that's basically the summary of the neuron. Blah 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 blah. The process of neurotransmission begins when a signal is received by the dendrites, which is then transmitted to the soma in the form of an electrical signal, and sometimes if it's strong enough, it can be passed on to the axon where it travels through to the terminal buttons. Once a signal reaches this stage, neurotransmitters are emitted, which communicate with other neurons in the synapses. When the cell contents are emitted into this free space, the process of exocytosis is occurring. However, not all the neurons are absorbed into other dendrites when they're released, and the ones that don't get absorbed are reabsorbed into the ones they came out of, and this is called reuptake, meaning they're reabsorbed into the terminal buttons and saved for release later. But in order for all this to happen, generally electrical signals move through the neurons as a result of changes in electrical charge of the axon. And normally it remains in resting potential. This is a state in which the interior of the neuron contains a greater number of negatively charged ions than the outside of the cell. But when the cell body is stimulated by an electrical signal from the dendrites, if it's strong enough, the cell membrane will open its gates, allowing positively charged sodium ions in. And this is often caused by a depolarizing current, meaning that the resting potential was being decreased, and when the depolarization reached a threshold of a great negative value, the electrical charges of the neuron changed. And this whole process is called action potential, and this process operates in an all or nothing manner, meaning that the neuron either fires completely, moving the potential all the way down the axon, or it doesn't fire at all. And then after this, usually if the action potential occurs, there's a refractory period during which the neurons are prevented from firing again until the neuron returns to resting potential, and then the whole process repeats itself.